You ever had a moment where you were just watching an anime and all you could think about was how much of its potential was being wasted? Maybe it was an anime that had a really great start but then progressively got worse as more and more episodes came out. Or maybe you could see the direction the story was going in from the very first episode and stuck around to see if you'd end up being right, watching it develop into a dumpster fire just to satisfy your morbid curiosity and ego. I'm sure we've all got one or two series that fall into that category. But for me, if there's one series I feel embodies the very essence of wasted potential, taking everything I just mentioned and rolling it into one mediocre sandwich, that would be Seraph of the End. Seraph of the End is the generic shonen people thought Black Clover was when it first started. It's a series that tries a bit too hard to be unique, bringing in so many elements to its setting that results in it failing to actually do anything worthwhile with them, throwing all that away to quickly fall into a generic tropey shonen. Yet somehow even fumbles that too. In case you haven't seen the series or don't remember all that much about it, I wouldn't blame you honestly. Let me give you a quick refresher. Seraph of the End is set in a post-apocalyptic world, one where 90% of humanity had been wiped out due to some strange virus, and the remaining 10% are forced to fight against the ever-present threat of vampires who want to harvest them for their blood, as well as these random monsters called the Horsemen of John that roam around causing nothing but destruction. Main character Yuichiro Hyakuya, nicknamed Yu, was an orphan who, along with a bunch of other orphans, one of them being our secondary main character Mikhail, were kids captured by the vampires and forced to live as livestock for 4 years. However, things go south for them when, in a failed attempt to escape from their lives as slaves, all of them get brutally slaughtered by a high-ranking vampire who had set them up, leaving Yu as the only person to make it out alive that day. And just as he gets out, he's met by the anti-vampire army, who just so happen to be waiting for him at that very moment, and thus begins his quest for revenge against every last vampire, vowing to wipe them all out. If it sounds eerily familiar, you're probably thinking of Attack on Titan. But comparing Seraph of the End to Attack on Titan would be unfair, so this will be the last time I mention it. There isn't a lot that makes this series stand out, but at the forefront of its strongest points has to be the first episode. The first episode does a lot of things well, from introducing us to the world to selling us on the bleak and near hopeless situations our main characters are forced to live in. It was pretty immersive and we got to know the kind of people these characters were. Sure, you could obviously tell the rest of the orphanage kids wouldn't last beyond this episode, but it was nice seeing just how much they loved each other, which is why it hits especially hard watching them get dropped towards the end of the episode. This is the moment that really drives in how brutal this world is if they aren't shying away from showing us stuff like this. You feel Yu's pain when he's forced to abandon the people that were his family, and you understand his motivations on getting revenge. You're given the impression that this path he's about to take will be a long and ruthless one. But then the second episode comes in and throws all that good stuff out the window to put us in a high school setting with all the typical shonen antics and gags you'd expect. This sudden change in setting and tone gives such a severe whiplash, one that the series never quite fully recovers from, made even worse when this part takes up half of the season's episode count. This part really stripped away a lot of the tension the first episode had set up. The school setting absolutely does not help in selling us the premise that this is a world where humanity is on the brink of extinction, struggling to stay alive. There were moments where I forgot this was a post-apocalyptic setting because of how easygoing the characters were taking things. I never once got the impression that humanity was really struggling, only being reminded by the amazing background art that this is in fact a world in ruin. And this lack of tension bleeds into the plot itself. Because of how generic and contrived the plot is, you never once feel like there are any real stakes or struggles the characters have to face, coupled with the fact that the characters face next to no consequences for their actions, leads to the whole thing feeling even more underwhelming. Like there is a serious lack of commitment in the series. Like for example, towards the end of the first season, when the vampires launch an attack on the humans, one of their big hotshot commanders, Guren, who is meant to be like the badass laid-back mentor type, gets stabbed directly in the chest, a wound that would kill anyone. Yu steps in to save him but hesitates to kill the vampire in front of him because he finds out that it's Mika. This moment had me believe the series would make a bold move and kill Guren right there as a result of Yu's hesitation, making him realize the realities of war, but nope, he gets up like it was nothing and even then continues to fight after this. Also, I need to go off a bit of a tangent here about this moment. The weapons the characters use, called cursed gear, are the only things able to kill vampires. Up until this point, we were given the impression that it's an insta-kill weapon. And in the hands of Yu, someone with a raging hate boner for vampires who kills first and asks questions later, All he needs is one clean swipe to take them out. So tell me why, out of all the times he's fought vampires, this is the first time he doesn't do that. Mind you, he didn't even know the vampire he was about to stab was his brother. This is also when we conveniently learn that the curse has to be activated to kill vampires, something that has never been mentioned up until now. Like, it makes no damn sense and only acts as a moment to have these two boys dramatically reunite with each other to drum up fake tension. Seraph of the End also suffers from having too many ideas that on paper sound cool, but never fails to properly execute them in a way that feels natural and cohesive. Like, we've got a crazy mysterious virus that wipes out humanity, mostly sparing people below the age of 13, the emergence of vampires who were at war with humans, the only thing able to kill them being super special weapons that house demons in them, which raises more questions, but you already know that these are most likely vampires somehow being converted into weapons. Messy politics within the Imperial Demon Army, and last of all, these random monsters called the Horsemen of John that just show up to wreak even more havoc. These are by far the worst addition to the story in my opinion. These things feel like they were just added to create a reason as to why people can't just be roaming around the ruined world, but they never once feel like they matter all that much to the overall story. You never get the impression that they were a threat to the characters and only acts as fodder to give us a semi-decent fight scene. They have zero aura, made even worse when we watch the main character single-handedly and quite easily kill one with just a single cut in the very second episode. It makes you wonder why they're even there in the first place when they serve no real purpose and add no tension whatsoever. It also doesn't help that the reason for their existence is told to us in passing, as if we're just expected to know. They go on to never elaborate afterwards. So coupled with its generic nature, all these cool ideas just end up being boring. Seraph of the End being generic is just one slice of the pie. I could overlook and even manage the generic story with a unique setting if the characters were fun to watch. Unfortunately, the characters somehow make the whole thing even worse. Starting off with main character Yu. He's super unlikable. He's arrogant, hot-headed and a total ass to everyone else for no apparent reason. They try to make him a tsundere that hides his feelings by acting tough, but it's so poorly executed that he just comes off as annoying and rude. Coupled with the fact that 80% of his lines have to do with hating and wanting to kill vampires while talking about how much of a strong lone wolf he is, you've got yourself a main character that is aggravating to watch and had me wishing he was a side character instead. And speaking of side characters, they are all painfully tropey with arcs you can see coming a mile away. Take this character, Yoichi. He's a kid who, much like you, watched his family get killed by vampires and plans on having revenge. But he's too timid, soft-spoken and not physically strong enough to handle fighting vampires the way others do, which is reflected in his weapon of choice being a bow. Basically, he's a twink. Yoichi's whole arc at the start is finding the strength and willpower to want to face the vampires, but the moment we're shown a glimpse of the vampire who killed his sister, you already know how his arc is going to end. He's going to somehow have a one-on-one fight with that vampire where he has a weak triumph the strong moment and prove that his strong word counts. Bonus points if he gets possessed by his cursed gear again. Don't get me wrong, I love the timid weakling character trope, evident by how much of a Takemichi stan I am, but I could not handle Yoichi at all. The rest of the supporting cast, from the pink-haired glasses guy to the yellow-haired tsundere and the overpowered but lazy mentor, are just as bad and underwhelming that I don't really have a lot to say on them. And don't get me started on the vampire faction. They all feel the same, behaving the exact way you'd expect hot anime vampire men to behave, classism included. They're the ones contributing to the bad rep anime vampires have. It's a shame because all these characters have such great designs. Like, the drip the demon army wears is simply immaculate. Their black uniforms accented with the sharp green makes for such stylish attire, complemented with the design of their cursed weapons, means they'll never be caught on fresh. Unfortunately, they are left to exist in a painfully mid-series. But in the boundless heap of garbage characters, there is one character I've refrained from mentioning so far. The only character that makes watching the series a tad bit more bearable. She straight up carried the series for me, and that would be Shinoa. This is the character you can tell had a lot more thought put into her and her design. She brings some much needed playfully chaotic energy to the main cast, mostly poking fun at the rest of the cast to get reactions from them. She's insanely charismatic, cute, and has a lot of wisdom behind her. Being the daughter to the leader of the demon army, she's got a lot of mystery surrounding her backstory and why she is the way she is, keeping us in the dark until the time is right. She's a good character that's unfortunately been locked behind a bad series. But even she's a victim to the absolutely atrocious dialogue the anime has. Anime in general has dialogue that tends to be fillery. If you've watched anime long enough, you know what I mean. They tend to say stuff and have conversations that don't really do all that much or mean anything, or sometimes they're relaying or reacting to exactly what is being shown on screen. It's something we're all used to. It's not like people in real life actually talk like this, but that doesn't mean it's all that bad. Good dialogue immerses you and goes unnoticeable because it just feels right. But the moment you start to notice the dialogue without intending to is the moment the dialogue gets bad. And I think this is the case with the whole sub versus dub argument. Lots of people don't realize that the reason they find dubs corny as hell is because you actually understand the language, which is why when bad dubs are bad, they're extra bad to you. But it's actually not so different with subs. Let me ask you this, have you ever noticed bad dialogue in subs? Like, take a moment to think about it. And if you have, let me know in the comments, I'm curious about it too. But for me, Seraph of the End was the first time I ever noticed bad subbed dialogue. And this isn't because of the localizers changing stuff up, no, it's the writing itself. The dialogue in the anime feels almost unnatural. If the MC isn't brushing people aside to mention how much he wants to kill vampires, they're dumping exposition on us while at the same time reiterating on things we've already seen. It gets really jarring. The worst examples of this for me has to be the first two episodes. In episode 1, when a younger you meets Mika at the orphanage for the first time, Mika introduces himself, mentioning how he was sad before and how they're family now, and Yu's response to this is to mention how, out of pocket, that his dad tried to kill him and his mom thought he was cursed and didn't want anything to do with him, so she offed herself. This was genuinely grating to listen to. Like Christ, no nuance at all. Maybe this was done on purpose because of how out of pocket children tend to be. The other example takes place in episode 2, right after Yu had been told by Shinoa that his suspension will be lifted if he's able to make a friend. Yu goes up for now he doesn't need anybody, which prompts Shinoa to pull a one-to-one read of his whole character, mentioning how because of his trauma, he's afraid to get close and form connections with other people because he doesn't want to suffer losing people again. Like, come on Shinoa, at least leave some for us to figure out. The dialogue treats us, the audience, like children who can't figure out the characters for ourselves or have our own interpretations of them. Ironic since this series is meant to be dark. I think this would be perfect for JJK fans. It's really heavy on tell don't show, and the overall presentation suffers for this because they are always taking their time to dump exposition on us without really showing. It takes a lot of the mystery and intrigue out of the world. And some of these things they mention so casually, as if you're expected to know beforehand. Like it wasn't until towards the end of the first season that they mentioned Yu had actually been experimented on. You'd think that something as big as being a child experiment would be shown to you in the first couple of episodes, but no. It's just thrown at you randomly and you're left scratching your head as to when and how this happened. Even Yu himself doesn't mention anything about it and doesn't seem to acknowledge it whatsoever. Maybe this is the case of being traumatized and forgetting, but surely someone would have said something more about this to lay the foundations of the reveal. The closest we get is some foreshadowing when Yu gets his cursed gear. The demon in the sword tells him that there's something else inside him, but Yu doesn't really react to that in any meaningful way, so you're just left to think it's his protagonist's plot armor. Which is why I rolled my eyes and checked out of the series when he entered this dark berserk mode. To me, Seraph of the End is the embodiment of mid. Not like when you call something mid you're calling it bad, no. I'm talking about exactly right in the middle where there are some good parts but the bad parts are too noticeable to make any of the good parts stand out. I guess you could squint and say Shinoa, but man, free my homegirl abeg, she deserves better than what she's getting in this series. But this is where I end the video. You know the drill, don't forget to like and subscribe. As always, this has been your very favorite slice of bread. Stay toasty.